It was early morning in Red Valley, and the sun was slowly rising over the hills, casting a soft golden light on the fields. Cowboy Tom had already started his day. He was busy fixing the wooden fence near his barn, making sure it was strong enough to keep his animals safe. The air was fresh and the birds were singing. Everything seemed peaceful, as it usually was in this quiet town. Suddenly, Tom noticed movement at the edge of his property. At first, he thought it was a stray dog or maybe one of his neighbor's animals wandering too far. But as he looked closer, he saw something unusual. A donkey was walking slowly along the path leading to his barn. The donkey was dragging a large black sack behind it. The sack was heavy, and it made the donkey wobble slightly with every step. Tom dropped his hammer and wiped his hands on his shirt. "Well, that is strange," he muttered. He had seen many animals in his life, but never a donkey carrying something like that. He walked closer, squinting at the early sunlight to see clearly. The donkey stopped a few feet away and looked at him with calm, steady eyes. Its ears twitched, and it seemed neither afraid nor aggressive. Tom felt a mix of curiosity and caution. "Hello there," he said softly. "Where did you come from? And what is that you're carrying?" The donkey did not answer, of course, but it lowered its head slightly, as if inviting Tom to come closer. The black sack looked old and worn. It was tied tightly at the top, and Tom could see that it was very heavy. Every now and then the sack moved slightly, like something inside was shifting or breathing. Tom's heart began to beat faster. He had learned over the years that unexpected things could be dangerous, but sometimes they could be wonderful too. Slowly he reached the donkey, speaking in a soft voice to keep it calm. "Let's see what you have there, friend," he said. The donkey blinked and stood still, letting him approach. Tom gently patted its neck, feeling the rough hair under his hand. He examined the sack more closely. It was bigger than a normal bag, and it had a faint smell that he could not identify. It was not unpleasant, but it was strong enough to make him curious. He tried to peek inside without opening it, but the cloth was thick. Whatever was inside, it was alive, and it made small, soft noises. Tom could feel a shiver of excitement run through him. He stepped back and thought for a moment. He needed tools to open the sack safely. He went to the barn and returned with a sturdy knife and a piece of rope. "We'll do this carefully," he said, speaking to the donkey as if it could understand him. He tied the donkey to a post to keep it from wandering while he worked. The donkey stood quietly, watching him with patient eyes. Tom knelt beside the black sack, his hands hovering over the knot at the top. Every muscle in his body felt tense with curiosity and a little fear. He had no idea what could be inside. It might be an animal that needed help, or it could be something that had been lost. He carefully untied the knot, making sure not to make sudden movements. The sack was heavy and it shifted slightly under his touch. As he lifted the top, he froze. Inside, something small moved. It was alive, but he could not tell what it was yet. He held his breath and waited, not wanting to startle whatever it was. The noises became clearer, like tiny movements and soft thumps. Tom's mind raced. Could it be a small animal, a bird, or something else entirely? The donkey nuzzled his hand gently as if encouraging him to continue. Tom took a deep breath and prepared to uncover the mystery hidden inside the black sack. Whatever it was, he knew this morning would not be like any other. The quiet, peaceful farm had suddenly become a place of mystery and curiosity, and Tom felt a strange excitement he had not felt in years. He slowly lifted the sack, holding it open just enough to see inside. The shapes inside moved again, curling and stretching, and Tom's heart pounded. He realized that he was about to discover something unexpected. Whatever it was, it had chosen him. The donkey had brought it to his farm, and now it was up to Tom to find out what this strange visitor had in store for him. Tom's hands trembled slightly as he knelt beside the black sack. The early morning sunlight fell across the barn floor, casting long shadows from the wooden beams. Every small movement of the sack made him start, and the soft thumps coming from inside made his curiosity grow even more. He had never seen anything like this before. The donkey stood nearby, watching him patiently, as if it knew that Tom was the one who could help whatever was inside. Tom leaned closer, his eyes fixed on the sack. He could see small shapes moving, curling and stretching, but he still could not tell what they were. His mind ran through all possibilities. Maybe it was a lost animal that needed care. Maybe it was a surprise someone had left behind. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something even stranger. Every time the sack moved, Tom's heart beat faster. He touched the top of the sack gently. It felt soft but firm, like it contained something alive. Tom could hear tiny squeaks and soft noises. He whispered to himself, "Come on, Tom, you can do this. Just take it slow." The donkey nuzzled his shoulder lightly, and Tom felt a little comfort from its calm presence. Tom decided to prepare the area before opening the sack completely. He spread a blanket on the barn floor. If whatever was inside jumped or fell, it would land safely. He also cleared a small space so he could move freely. Then he knelt back beside the sack, hands hovering above it. He thought about what he would do if the creature inside was scared or frightened. He had to be gentle, careful, and patient. He started to untie the knot at the top of the sack slowly. The fabric resisted a little, but after a few careful pulls, the knot began to loosen. As he did this, he could hear the noises inside more clearly. They were tiny, soft, and almost musical in a way. Tom leaned even closer, curiosity and worry mixing in his mind. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew he had to be ready for anything. Suddenly, a small shape poked its head up from the sack. Tom froze. The shape was covered in soft, dark fur. It blinked at him with tiny, bright eyes. Tom held his breath. He had never seen such small creatures up close before. They looked frightened, but also curious. Tom smiled softly, whispering, "Hello there, little one. It's okay. You're safe now." The sound of his voice seemed to calm the creature inside the sack. Encouraged by this, Tom slowly lifted the sack a little higher. More shapes became visible. There were several small creatures, all huddled together. They were tiny, with soft fur and alert eyes, moving carefully inside the sack. Tom realized that the noises he had heard were their little movements, trying to understand the world around them. He could feel his heart swell with both relief and excitement. The donkey shifted its weight, stepping closer as if to watch over Tom. Tom laughed softly. "I think you brought me something important, didn't you?" he said. The donkey blinked slowly, its ears twitching. Tom felt a strong connection to the animal, as if it understood the responsibility now resting on his shoulders. He had been chosen to care for these creatures, and he could not ignore it. Carefully, Tom lifted the creatures out of the sack one by one, placing them on the soft blanket. They were light and delicate, and they moved cautiously, sniffing the air and stretching their tiny legs. Tom watched each one, noticing how alert and intelligent they were. He realized that they needed care, warmth, and attention. He looked at the donkey, which seemed content to stand by quietly, guarding them. Tom sat back on his heels, taking a deep breath. The quiet barn was suddenly filled with life. Tiny movements, soft sounds, and the gentle presence of the donkey made the space feel warm and alive. Tom smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and wonder. He had no idea how these creatures had come to him, or why the donkey had chosen him, but he knew one thing for certain. His life had just changed in a way he could not have imagined. For the first time that morning, Tom felt a deep sense of purpose. He gently patted the creatures, whispering reassurances while the donkey stood nearby as their silent protector. He knew this was only the beginning. The mystery of the black sack was solved, but the real journey, caring for these tiny creatures, was just beginning. Tom's quiet farm had turned into a place of discovery, wonder, and unexpected friendship, and he was ready for it. After the initial surprise of discovering the tiny creatures in the black sack, Tom sat quietly in the barn, watching them explore the blanket. Each movement was careful and deliberate, their tiny paws patting softly against the fabric. They sniffed the air and twitched their little ears, trying to understand the world around them. Tom could see the curiosity in their bright eyes, and it made him smile. The donkey stayed nearby, standing quietly, almost as if it were guarding the new visitors. Tom realized that he needed to learn more about these creatures before he could care for them properly. He had grown up around animals, horses, cows, and dogs, but these little creatures were different. He noticed that they were very alert and moved in unison, as if they were used to relying on each other for safety. "I guess you all have been through a lot," he said gently. He wanted to understand them, but he knew he had to be patient and careful. He decided to start with food. Tom fetched a small bowl and filled it with fresh milk. He remembered the soft sounds the creatures had made in the sack, and he thought milk might be the safest option. Slowly, he placed the bowl on the blanket. At first, the creatures hesitated. They stayed huddled together, glancing at him with small, trusting eyes. Then one of them stepped forward cautiously, sniffing the milk. After a moment of hesitation, it began to drink. Soon the others followed. Tom watched with relief and a quiet sense of wonder. Once they had eaten, Tom wanted to give them a little space to rest. He had built a small pen inside the barn using wooden panels, creating a safe corner with soft blankets. He gently lifted each tiny creature and placed it in the pen. They huddled together, curling up for warmth, and Tom felt a wave of affection. He could tell that they trusted him, even though they had just met. The donkey leaned closer, nudging the side of the pen with its nose as if approving the arrangement. Tom sat back and observed. He noticed small details, the way the creatures twitched their noses when they sniffed the air, how they moved in careful, coordinated steps, and how they occasionally glanced at the donkey. It seemed they recognized the donkey as a friend, or at least as someone who meant them no harm. Tom felt amazed by the connection between the animals. Somehow, this mysterious arrival had brought together three very different creatures: the donkey, the tiny animals, and himself, in a way that felt almost magical. The sun was climbing higher in the sky, filling the barn with warm light. Tom realized that he needed to keep a close watch on the little creatures while they adjusted to their new surroundings. He checked the blankets and made sure there was fresh water nearby. He talked softly to them, naming each one in his mind, though he did not speak the names aloud yet. He wanted them to feel safe and understood. Every movement they made seemed meaningful, and Tom knew he had to be patient and attentive. Hours passed quickly, though it hardly felt like time at all. Tom was fascinated by every small action of the creatures. One climbed over another, testing its balance, while another stretched and yawned softly. They were growing more comfortable with their new environment, and Tom could see tiny sparks of personality emerging. It made him think about how lucky he was to have discovered them and how important it was to take care of them properly. By the end of the day, Tom had set up a routine. He made sure the pen was comfortable, the food and water were ready, and the little creatures felt safe. The donkey remained close, lying down nearby but keeping a watchful eye. Tom felt a deep sense of responsibility but also a growing joy. He had no idea who had left the creatures in the black sack or why the donkey had brought them to him. But he knew one thing. This farm had become a place of wonder, and he was ready to face whatever challenges and surprises came next. Tom stood up and looked at the donkey, then back at the tiny creatures. "Tomorrow we will learn more about you," he said quietly. The donkey flicked its ears as if agreeing. The barn, once quiet and ordinary, now felt alive with energy, curiosity, and the promise of new beginnings. Tom smiled, feeling that this was just the start of a remarkable journey that would change his life in ways he could not yet imagine. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over Red Valley, painting the farm with soft golden light. Cowboy Tom woke early, feeling a mixture of excitement and curiosity. The little creatures in the barn had slept soundly through the night, huddled together for warmth. The donkey was already awake, standing near the pen and watching him with calm, steady eyes. Tom smiled as he entered the barn, eager to see how his new friends had fared overnight. The creatures stirred as he approached, stretching and blinking in the soft morning light. They looked at him with bright, alert eyes, and Tom noticed something he hadn't seen the day before. Each of them had tiny, delicate markings on their fur, patterns that made them look unique. One had a faint stripe across its back, another had small patches of lighter color on its paws, and the third had a little tuft of white fur on its head. Tom knelt beside them, fascinated. These small details made the creatures even more special in his eyes. After checking that the pen was secure and the creatures had water, Tom decided it was time to let them explore a little outside the pen. He gently lifted each one, placing them on the soft hay-covered floor of the barn. The creatures looked around, sniffing the air and testing their tiny legs. They moved carefully, almost as if they were learning about the world for the first time. Tom watched every step, ready to intervene if necessary, but the little creatures were surprisingly brave. The donkey shifted its weight, stepping closer to observe. Tom realized that the donkey seemed to understand the creatures better than he did. It was calm, patient, and protective, staying near them without making sudden movements. Tom smiled, realizing that the donkey had played a crucial role in bringing the creatures safely to him. Somehow it had known that he would care for them. Tom sat back on his heels, watching the creatures move. They were curious and playful, chasing each other in small circles, tumbling gently over the hay. Their tiny squeaks and soft movements made the barn feel alive in a way Tom had never experienced before. He felt a strong sense of wonder. How had these creatures ended up in the black sack? Who had put them there? And why had the donkey brought them specifically to his farm? He decided to investigate further. Tom picked up the black sack, inspecting it carefully. It was empty now, but he noticed small traces of hay and dirt inside, as if the creatures had been traveling for a while before being placed in it. He ran his fingers over the fabric and thought about the possibilities. Someone might have left the creatures for him to find, or perhaps the donkey had found them on its own. Either way, Tom knew that their arrival was no accident. As he considered these questions, one of the tiny creatures climbed onto the donkey's back. The donkey remained still, allowing it to stay there. Tom laughed softly. "You trust each other already, don't you?" he said. The bond between the creatures and the donkey was clear, and it filled Tom with a sense of awe. He had never seen animals form such an immediate connection before. Tom spent the rest of the morning observing the little creatures. They were playful, intelligent, and remarkably coordinated. One discovered a small wooden box in the barn and tried to open it with its tiny paws. Another followed closely behind, learning from the first. Tom realized that they were quick learners and that they had personalities of their own. They were not just helpless animals. They were small beings with curiosity, courage, and intelligence. By midday, Tom had a plan. He would build a small outdoor area for the creatures so they could safely explore the farm. He would watch them closely, teaching them about their new home while keeping them safe. He felt a mix of excitement and responsibility. The black sack had brought them to him, but it was now his job to care for them and help them grow. As he looked at the donkey standing nearby, Tom whispered, "Thank you, friend. I think we're going to have quite an adventure together." The donkey blinked slowly, its calm gaze steady on him. Tom realized that this was just the beginning. The mystery of the black sack had started to reveal itself, and the journey ahead promised wonder, surprises, and the kind of friendship he had never imagined. The barn, once quiet and ordinary, was now filled with life, energy, and curiosity. Tom smiled, ready for the day ahead. He knew that every moment with the creatures and the donkey would teach him something new, and he was eager to discover the secrets that this strange and wonderful morning had begun to uncover. By late morning, the barn was filled with life. The tiny creatures moved about the hay-covered floor, exploring every corner with careful curiosity. Tom watched them closely, fascinated by each little movement. They were playful, intelligent, and surprisingly agile. Their soft squeaks and little leaps made the barn feel alive, more than it had ever felt before. Tom had begun to notice small details he had missed before. Their fur was shiny and smooth, with distinct markings that made each one unique. One had a stripe along its back, another had tiny patches of white on its paws, and the third had a tuft of hair on its head that stood up like a small crown. Their eyes were bright and alert, reflecting the sunlight streaming through the barn windows. Tom realized he was not looking at ordinary animals. These creatures were special in a way he could not explain. The donkey stood close by, calm and watchful, as if it understood the importance of these creatures. Tom smiled at the sight. It seemed clear that the donkey had led these tiny beings to him for a reason, but what that reason was, he could not yet guess. For now, he focused on caring for them and learning more about their behavior. After a while, Tom decided to see how they reacted to being outside the pen. He gently lifted each creature and placed them on the barn floor, letting them roam freely. They moved cautiously at first, sniffing and testing the space around them. One climbed onto a small wooden crate, balancing carefully on its tiny paws. Another discovered a pile of hay and began burrowing, as if exploring a hidden tunnel. The third twitched its ears and leapt lightly onto a hay bale, showing a playful energy that made Tom laugh quietly. Suddenly, one of the creatures let out a soft, high-pitched squeak. It wasn't a sound of fear, but of excitement. Tom's eyes widened as he realized they were communicating with each other. They had personalities, instincts, and perhaps even a way of understanding one another. It was remarkable to witness, and Tom felt a growing sense of awe. He watched as the donkey stepped closer, nuzzling the creatures gently. They responded with small movements of approval, showing that they trusted the donkey completely. Tom realized that the donkey was not just a visitor. It was a guardian and a guide for the tiny creatures. Somehow it had known that these beings needed help and had brought them directly to him. Curiosity overwhelmed Tom. He gently lifted one of the creatures to examine it more closely. Its tiny paws rested in his hands and its bright eyes looked up at him. He could feel its heartbeat, fast but steady. Tom whispered softly, "You are safe now. Don't worry." The creature twitched its ears and blinked, then settled calmly in his hands. Tom felt a rush of emotion. The black sack had hidden these small beings, and now he was the one responsible for their care. As the morning passed, Tom noticed that the creatures were becoming more comfortable with their surroundings. They explored confidently, jumping from crate to hay bale and sniffing the corners of the barn. Their movements were coordinated yet playful. It was clear that they were learning quickly, observing the environment and reacting in intelligent ways. Tom's mind raced with questions. Where had they come from? How had they survived before finding the donkey? And why had they been left in that black sack? The donkey shifted its weight and looked at Tom, almost as if it were asking him to pay attention. Tom nodded, understanding the silent message. He needed to prepare a safe area for the creatures to explore outside the barn, a place where they could play, learn, and grow. He began thinking about building a small enclosure in the yard with soft grass, hay, and small shelters for them to rest. As he worked, he kept glancing at the creatures. Their small bodies moved with energy and curiosity, and their eyes sparkled with intelligence. Tom realized that this was not just a simple responsibility. It was a gift. The donkey had delivered something truly extraordinary, and now he had the chance to care for it. His heart swelled with excitement, pride, and a sense of purpose he had never felt before. By noon, Tom stepped back and watched the barn once more. The creatures explored, played, and interacted with the donkey, forming bonds that seemed natural and unbreakable. Tom felt a thrill of joy. The mystery of the black sack had been partially solved, but the real wonder, the life and spirit of these tiny beings, was only beginning to reveal itself. He knew that the coming days would bring more surprises, discoveries, and adventures than he could ever imagine. The day had grown warm, and the sun shone brightly over Red Valley. Cowboy Tom stepped into the barn, feeling a mix of excitement and responsibility. The tiny creatures from the black sack were awake and moving around the pen, their small paws making soft rustling sounds on the hay. They twitched their ears and sniffed the air, their bright eyes scanning every corner. Tom smiled as he watched them. He knew that caring for these creatures would take patience and attention. They were small, delicate, and full of curiosity. Tom gently placed a fresh bowl of milk in the pen, making sure it was stable so it would not tip over. The creatures hesitated at first, glancing at him and the donkey, then slowly began to drink. Each tiny movement made Tom laugh quietly. Their careful, almost cautious actions showed intelligence and awareness, and he felt proud to be their protector. After they had eaten, Tom decided it was time for them to explore a little more. He gently lifted each one from the pen and placed them on the hay-covered barn floor. They moved cautiously at first, testing the space, then became more confident. One climbed onto a small wooden crate, balancing skillfully on its tiny paws. Another hopped onto a hay bale, sniffing the air with curiosity. The third ran across the floor, its little legs moving quickly, exploring every corner. Tom watched carefully, ready to step in if any of them stumbled. The donkey stayed nearby, standing quietly as the creatures explored. Tom noticed something remarkable. The creatures seemed to understand the donkey in a way he could not. They approached it without fear, nuzzling its side and climbing gently on its back. The donkey responded patiently, standing still and calm as if it were guiding them. Tom realized that the donkey had been more than just a messenger. It was a guardian and a teacher for these little creatures. Tom decided it was time to give the creatures a more permanent space. He gathered wooden panels and created a small enclosure in the barn, lined with soft blankets and straw. This would be their home for the day, a safe place to play and rest. He placed the creatures inside carefully. They sniffed around, testing their new surroundings, then curled up together for warmth. Tom smiled, feeling satisfaction and pride. As the afternoon passed, Tom observed their behavior closely. The creatures were playful but also cautious, learning from each other and exploring their environment. One of them discovered a small box and began investigating it with tiny, careful paws. Another followed, watching and learning. Tom noticed that they were quick learners, intelligent and alert. He realized that they were not ordinary animals. They were special in ways he could only begin to understand. Tom spent the day gently interacting with the creatures, talking softly to them and encouraging them to explore. He gave them fresh water and more milk, making sure each one was comfortable. The donkey remained close, keeping a watchful eye, ensuring that everything stayed calm. Tom felt a deep connection forming between him, the donkey, and the tiny creatures. It was as if they had been meant to find each other. As evening approached, Tom watched the creatures settle down on the blankets in their pen. Their small bodies huddled together for warmth, and their breathing became slow and steady. The donkey lay nearby, standing guard over them. Tom felt a wave of satisfaction. The day had been filled with discovery, care, and quiet joy. He realized that the black sack had brought something extraordinary into his life. Before leaving the barn for the night, Tom whispered softly to the donkey, "Thank you for bringing them here. We'll take care of them together." The donkey blinked slowly, as if understanding every word. Tom knew that this was only the beginning. The tiny creatures were growing stronger and more confident every day, and he would continue to learn from them, protect them, and help them discover the world around them. That night, as Tom closed the barn door and stepped outside, he looked at the horizon and felt a sense of wonder. The farm, once quiet and ordinary, had become a place of life, learning, and unexpected friendship. He knew the journey with these tiny creatures, and the donkey would continue to surprise him, teaching him lessons about patience, care, and the bonds that could form between different beings. The next morning, Red Valley was bathed in warm sunlight. Cowboy Tom walked into the barn with a sense of excitement. The tiny creatures from the black sack were awake and already moving about in their small pen. They twitched their ears and looked around curiously, showing more confidence than the day before. Tom smiled. It was clear they were becoming stronger and more comfortable in their new home. He knelt beside the pen, speaking softly to the creatures. "Good morning, little ones. Ready to explore?" The creatures responded with small, eager movements. One hopped lightly onto a wooden crate, testing its balance. Another sniffed at the edge of the pen, moving carefully but confidently. The third twitched its nose and leapt toward the straw pile, exploring every detail. Tom watched, fascinated by their intelligence and curiosity. The donkey stood close by, as always, calm and protective. Tom noticed that the creatures seemed to understand the donkey in a remarkable way. They approached it without fear, climbing gently on its back or nuzzling its side. The donkey remained patient, almost as if it were guiding them. Tom felt a deep sense of awe. The donkey had not only brought these creatures to him, but it had also become a teacher and guardian for them. Tom decided it was time to let the creatures explore a little outside the barn. He led the donkey and creatures to a small yard near the farm. The grass was soft and the sunlight warmed the ground. The tiny creatures hesitated at first, sniffing the air and glancing around. Then one of them ran a short distance, its tiny legs moving quickly, full of energy. The others followed, their movements playful and coordinated. Tom laughed softly, enjoying the sight. He watched as the creatures explored the yard, hopping over small rocks, sniffing the flowers, and occasionally glancing back at him for reassurance. The donkey followed, keeping a careful watch over them. Tom realized that a strong bond had formed between the creatures and the donkey. They trusted it completely, and it protected them without a single word. Tom spent the morning observing their behavior. The creatures were smart, learning from each other and experimenting with their environment. One discovered a small wooden box and tried to climb onto it. Another followed, imitating the first. Tom noticed that they were playful but also cautious, a combination that made them very interesting to watch. Their personalities were starting to show. As the day went on, Tom took time to interact with them more directly. He let them climb onto his lap carefully, petting them gently. They twitched their ears and blinked their bright eyes, showing trust and comfort. The donkey nuzzled him occasionally, as if joining in the affection. Tom felt a sense of happiness he had never felt before. These creatures, small and fragile as they were, had brought life, joy, and companionship to his farm. By afternoon, Tom had created a little routine. He made sure the creatures had fresh water and milk, a soft place to rest, and room to explore safely. The donkey remained their quiet protector, always close but never intrusive. Tom realized that the bond between them was not just about care. It was about friendship, trust, and understanding. As the sun began to lower in the sky, the tiny creatures curled up together in the straw while the donkey lay nearby. Tom sat on a wooden crate watching them sleep. He felt proud of the life he had helped create and protect. The black sack had brought mystery and surprise into his farm, but it had also brought a deep sense of connection and responsibility. Tom whispered softly to the donkey, "We make a good team, don't we?" The donkey blinked slowly as if agreeing. Tom realized that this bond, the bond between him, the donkey, and the tiny creatures, was something extraordinary. It was more than trust. It was a quiet, unspoken understanding that would guide them through every day. As evening approached, Tom knew that more adventures awaited. The creatures were growing stronger, braver, and more playful every day. The farm had changed completely from the quiet, ordinary place it had been. It was now alive with energy, curiosity, and friendship. Tom felt ready to face whatever surprises lay ahead, knowing that together they could handle anything. The sun rose gently over Red Valley, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and orange. Cowboy Tom stepped out of his house and breathed deeply. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of grass and hay. He looked toward the barn where the donkey stood patiently, as if waiting for him. Tom knew it would be another day of caring for the little creatures, but deep inside he felt that something special was about to happen. When he entered the barn, the tiny creatures were already awake. They moved around with more confidence than ever, their little paws scratching softly against the hay. Tom noticed how quickly they had grown in such a short time. Their fur looked brighter, their movement stronger, and their eyes more alert. They greeted him with energy, hopping, climbing, and sniffing curiously. Tom smiled and knelt to pet them one by one. The donkey watched quietly, standing nearby as usual. Tom had often wondered why the donkey had brought the sack to him in the first place. The answer still felt like a mystery, but now he believed the donkey had known what it was doing all along. It had not been a simple act of chance, it had been a choice. Tom decided to take the creatures outside for a walk. The morning sun was warm and the fields were glowing with light. He opened the barn door and the creatures ran out eagerly, with the donkey following calmly behind. Tom laughed as they played in the grass, chasing each other in small circles and leaping over stones. They were full of life and joy, and watching them made his heart lighter. But as Tom watched, he noticed something unusual. The creatures began to move in a way he had not seen before. They gathered together in a small group, their tiny paws touching as if they were communicating. Their bright eyes shone with an unusual light, and they began making soft musical sounds. The donkey stepped closer, lowering its head as if listening carefully. Tom stood still, amazed. It was clear that the creatures were not ordinary at all. They were showing a kind of wisdom and unity that went beyond simple play. Slowly, the group turned toward Tom. For a moment, he felt as if they were trying to tell him something important. Then, something even more surprising happened. The creatures climbed onto the donkey's back, one by one, and sat together as if ready for a journey. The donkey brayed softly, a sound filled with meaning. Tom felt his chest tighten. Was this the moment when they would leave? He stepped forward and said softly, "Are you going somewhere?" The creatures blinked at him, their eyes gentle, almost thankful. The donkey looked at him too, calm and steady. Tom realized that the bond they had formed would not disappear, but perhaps their path was leading somewhere beyond his farm. Still, the creatures did not leave right away. Instead, they climbed down again and gathered around Tom. They brushed against his boots, climbed onto his lap, and nuzzled his hands. It was their way of showing gratitude. Tom's heart filled with warmth. He understood that even if they left one day, the bond between them would remain. The rest of the day passed peacefully. Tom fed them, played with them, and let them rest under the shade of the trees. The donkey stood guard as always, calm and dependable. Tom realized that his life had been changed forever. The farm was no longer a quiet, lonely place. It was alive with friendship, laughter, and purpose. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tom sat outside the barn with the donkey beside him. The creatures were curled up together in their pen, their tiny bodies rising and falling with gentle breaths. Tom looked at the stars appearing in the sky and felt a deep sense of peace. He whispered, "Thank you, old friend," as he placed a hand on the donkey's neck. "You brought me a gift I never expected." The donkey blinked slowly as if agreeing. Tom knew that the mystery of the black sack might never be fully solved, but he also knew it no longer mattered. What mattered was the life it had brought, the joy it had created, and the bond it had formed. In the quiet of that night, Tom understood that sometimes the greatest treasures were not gold or silver, but trust, care, and friendship. And so, the story of the cowboy, the donkey, and the tiny creatures continued, not with an ending but with a promise of more days filled with light, laughter, and the quiet strength of love.